There is active and explicit hiring discrimination against non-left voices when they apply for faculty positions in many of these disciplines. And this isn't just me speculating or relaying anecdotes. There have been several studies that have asked university faculty in some of these left-leaning humanities and social sciences, do you discriminate against non-leftist applicants for jobs in your department? And they proudly will declare yes. They'll say, we absolutely do, and then they'll follow it up with something because we're right and they're wrong.
Wow.
So that has become actually a very pervasive feature of higher ed in the last 20 years that used to not be the case.
Let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on The Brian Nichols Show. Thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny and lovely Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by our amazing sponsor, Amp America. Folks, if you're looking for all the news you need to know without the corporate media bias or fluff, head to ampamerica.com. We have news articles, opinion pieces, podcasts, and more. One more time, ampamerica.com. Also, The Brian Nichols Show and yours truly, personally powered by our phenomenal studio sponsor, Cardio Miracle. So if you're looking for, folks, for yes, literally the best heart health supplement in the world. It will help lower that resting heart rate. It will help lower your blood pressure while giving you an increased pump at the gym, helping improve those restless nights of sleep. Stick around. We're going to talk more about Cardio Miracle later in today's episode. But first, we're going to be talking all things the colleges, the universities, the leftism that has seeped into our institutions of higher education, air quotes for the audio listener. Let's dig into that today. I know when I went to college, yes, it was quite obvious that leftism is quite prominent on your college campuses, but has it gotten worse? And if so, what's the impact? Let's talk all of that today. Joining us to discuss that and more, Phil Magness. Welcome here to the Brian Nichols Show. Phil, how you doing?
Oh, doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. I know I'm really looking forward to talking all things higher academia. But first, Phil, let's do the audience a favor. If you could, please introduce yourself here to the Brian Nichols Show audience and why your focus on the creeping left-leaning ideology on these college campuses.
Yeah. So I'm the David J. Thoreau Chair in Political Economy at the Independent Institute. It's a free market research institute based in California. But I also do background in the study of trends and patterns in higher education. So I co-authored the book Cracks in the Ivory Tower, The Moral Mess of Higher Ed with Jason Brennan. That's basically an exploration of why colleges seem to be falling short of their promise to uphold the values of free and open inquiry and solid research and knowledge creation and all the things that it sells the public on its supposed purpose in American life.
Well, an elephant in the room, right? We talk about here in the Brian Nichols Show, our sales strategy. We like to teach the elephant in the room approach. Let's just start out right here. Elephant in the room, confidence in higher education,
Absolutely.
Colleges, universities. I mean, it's been creeping down for a while, Phil, but you look at the most recent numbers and that number, it just goes off a cliff. What's happened? Why is there such distrust?
Exactly. So this is the new Gallup poll that just came out last week. It showed that among Republicans and independents, support for higher education is just cratering. It used to be something that everyone across American society, no matter their political views, viewed higher education as a positive benefit to society. It instilled knowledge. It taught the next generation. It created scientific advances. But if you ask that same question today, both among Republicans and independents, it's now dipping into a minority of each faction even thinks college is worth it, thinks they're supporting. And the reason that they all cite over and over again is higher education has crept sharply to the political left in the last 20 years. It's not even what we knew from a couple decades ago. Colleges were always kind of left of center, that was the biggest faction on the faculty. They had identified on the political left, identified as Democrats. Now it's so overwhelming that there are barely any other viewpoints that are even represented on campus in many disciplines.
So I like to talk about this on the show. We talk about addressing the problems, but we also talk about getting to the root cause of those problems, right, Phil? Because it's one thing to fix the cancer in the arm, but if you just cut the arm off and the cancer's still there, cancer's still going to grow back. So I guess let's go to the root causes of this deep-seated leftism that has been growing in these, again, air quotes on the institutions of higher knowledge, higher education. I mean, you're seeing, to your point, it used to be, and I'm not that old, I'm in my mid-30s, but like when I was on college campus, my advisor and my main political science professor, he was a Democrat, and in the room too. He was, his family, good friends with the Clintons. Take that for what it's worth. But like having conversations with him, even though it was quite obvious that we disagreed on policy, on principles, we were able to still have a dialogue. He would hear my perspectives, and likewise, I would hear his, and we'd have a fun back and forth in the college class. But you look to where it is today, it feels like that mentality is gone. It feels much more like these professors are driving kids to be little activists. So I guess the question needs to be asked, is that what happened to them? That they were, I guess the better word I could use is groomed to become these left-wing, just pushers of ideology to the next generation?
Yeah. Well, what you're describing is absolutely supported in survey data of university faculty. So if you asked a question about 15 or 20 years ago, what's the purpose? What's the reason that you are in the classroom? What are you trying to do and convey? And the typical professor would have answered, well, I am training the next generation. I am conveying knowledge. I'm conveying expertise and specialties in my field. You ask those same questions today. The most recent survey showed that more than 80% of university faculty say that one of their main purposes in the classroom is to train activists, is to induce people to go out and change society. And when they say change society, they don't mean activism across the political spectrum. They mean one specific stripe of activism that's on the hard left.
It's the Star Wars meme with Padme Amidala and Anakin Skywalker sitting in the green field.
Yep.
Yeah, she's like, you're gonna change it for the better, right? And he just stares. For the better, right? That's what this feels like.
That's it. That's exactly it. And it's an entirely different style of approaching the classroom from professors than what you and I knew a couple decades ago as we went through higher education. I had the exact same experience. The majority of professors that I encountered probably didn't agree with me on politics. But if you look at data from as recently as like 2000, it was about 40 to 45% of the faculty were on the political left. But there were sizable minorities on the political right, sizable minorities that considered themselves moderates. So you like 40% on the left, then maybe 20 or 30% on the right, and then the rest is somewhere in between. That's a reasonable balance. It means that you can have a conversation on campus. That all shifted in the last 20 years. It's now upwards of 60% of all faculty identifying the political left. And if you move into the humanities and social sciences, places like literature and history and philosophy and sociology, it's more like 80 or 90% of the faculty are identifying the political left. It means that there are almost no dissenting viewpoints. And the other really frightening trend of this is while you used to have these minority factions of conservatives and moderates, both of those are in absolute decline for the first time since basically they started measuring it in the 1960s. So it's between 2000 and today. Moderates and conservatives are in absolute decline. Conservatives have dropped off the cliff on the faculty ranks so much. Their current estimates are maybe about 10 to 12% of university faculty identifying the political right. And that's a smaller number than university faculty who identify as Marxists. So you've got a university system that is completely out of line with the American public that has a diverse array of views within it. Whereas the university is entirely representative of viewpoints in the political left now.
So how do they keep on keeping on? Because we talk about, free market economics, supply and demand, incentive structures, all those fun things that lead to creating solutions or old solutions dying away. And if you were to look at this higher education system, objectively speaking, and I think you look at where we are right now, folks like Bill Ackman who are being like, all righty, pulling my dollars out of my my alma mater, right? Like, and he's a billionaire.
Yeah,
I mean, hey, folks, I want to take a moment to talk about something that has truly changed my life, and that is Cardio Miracle, our incredible studio sponsor. Now, I'll be honest, when I first heard about Cardio Miracle and their claims about improving heart health, I was skeptical. But after using it for just about 2 months, I was absolutely blown away by the results. First, my blood pressure went from being consistently around 140/90 to a much more healthier and manageable 120/80. And my resting heart rate dropped from the low 70s to the high 50s. And I couldn't believe it. But the benefits didn't stop there. I started sleeping better, and I felt more energized at the gym, and my heart felt the best it's felt in years. And it's not just me. Hundreds of you, our amazing listeners, have reached out to share your own incredible experiences with Cardio Miracle. So, what is Cardio Miracle, and how does it work? It's a carefully crafted supplement that harnesses the power of nitric oxide to support optimal heart function. So, by increasing nitric oxide levels in your blood, Cardio Miracle helps relax your blood vessels, improve circulation, and it protects your heart from damage. It's like giving your heart the support it needs to function at its best. And here's the best part. We've got an exclusive offer just for you, our loyal listeners here at the Brian Nichols Show. When you head over to cardiomiracle.com and use code TBNS at checkout, you'll get an extra 15% discount on your order. Plus, with their 100% money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. So, if you're ready to take control of your heart health and experience the life-changing benefits of Cardio Miracle for yourself, just click the link in the show notes or video description. Trust me, your heart will thank you. And don't wait another day to prioritize your health. Join the tens of thousands of folks who have already discovered the Cardio Miracle difference. Head to cardiomiracle.com now and use code TBNS for 15% off your order. Your journey to a happier and healthier heart starts today. And now, let's get back to the show. And is that where we are right now? Is that we just, the folks who were just going along to get along, they were like, whatever. It's where I went to college, had some good memories there. I'll go ahead and donate $35 million for the Bill Ackman Hall, or whatever it may be. Right. Like, are we at the point now where it's those individuals who they were, and you know what, here, I'll give the John Mulaney skit, right? He's talking about back when Trump was president, and he's thinking back to Obama, and he's like, I used to think the guy that was there before, he was doing an okay job. I really didn't pay attention, because when the guy's doing an okay job, you really don't pay attention to what they're doing. And now we have a horse in the hospital, and that's the whole joke he does. I mean, is it really that the leftism on campus has become the proverbial horse in the hospital, and now all these folks who are like, I just thought the colleges were doing an okay job, now they're starting to wake up and pull the dollars away?
I think that's absolutely what's going on. And the major events for that is when we saw the Claudine Gay testimony on the anti-Israel protests on campus. And that's only blown up ever since then. So over the last 6 to 8 months, we've seen these crazy far left protest shops being set up, the occupations of the quad or the invasion of buildings in very violent and destructive ways. And the public is looking on from afar and seeing this in real time, and they're legitimately horrified at some of the expressions of anti-Semitism that have been tolerated, some of the violent actions that seem to have the support of faculty and administrators on their own campuses, or even the co-opting of the Gaza-Palestine protests themselves. So no matter where you stand on the war, we've seen the intrusion of just overt Marxist activism into this cause, and they basically co-opted it to agitate for revolutionary violence. It's some really extreme stuff that's on full public display. People have seen it, and they have legitimately recoiled in horror, and they're starting to ask the question, well, what's going on these campuses? Why aren't these students actually in class learning things? Instead, their professors are encouraging them to set up a tent encampment on the mall. Or to occupy a building, or to smash things, or to shout anti-Semitic slurs at other students. And this is seen as like heroic and valorized among the faculty. What it tells us is that the faculty of most universities are completely out of skew with the political opinions, the diverse political opinions of the American public. And that means, what do voters do? They start cutting off dollars. They start cutting off subsidies.
Well, Phil, I love to hear that folks are starting to wake up, but I mean, let's just look at the data we presented here today. 80% plus or minus of faculty, staff, and administrators at these colleges and universities leaning, far left. Minority of folks who are conservative is actually lesser than the folks at these college campuses who are Marxist. You see that if that's the case, right, you have all these professors, all these faculty, all these administrators across hundreds of colleges and universities throughout the United States, and dare I say throughout the world, right? But let's look at the United States. I say all that. It's great that folks are starting to wake up. But Phil, elephant in the room again, is it too late? I mean, are we at the point, right, where I don't know where we're going to get 80% of conservative or moderate-leaning replacements for the 80% of folks who are out there on the left who are currently filling those seats in academia? Like, is it at a point where we're just going to have to throw our hands up and say, this system is broken and we need something different? Or do you see that there's a chance to reclaim the institutions of higher education?
Yeah, so I'm an optimist in the long run. I think historians are going to look back at this time and they're going to ask the question, like, what went wrong in American higher education? Why did it suddenly become so skewed? Why did it cease to represent the public that is funding it?
And what do you think to that, by the way? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my own take on this is that, yeah, something has to give in higher education. We can't sustain a system that has heavy billions upon billions of dollars of public investment in it that's only servicing a narrow far left ideology. Basically, what's going on right now is the left-wing professors and administrators on campus are asking the public to open up their purse and subsidize far left-wing activism. That's not in the interest of the public. It's not aligned with the public good arguments that are often made for financing higher education. And pretty soon the voters start to notice that. So I think what's actually going to end up happening in the short run is there will be a contraction in public support subsidy given to higher education as a backlash against the ideology that's taken root on campus. And I can't blame voters for that. It's very real. The blame is actually the professors and administrators who did this to themselves. They said other viewpoints are not welcome on campus, but you should continue to fund us anyway. That's not a sustainable formula.
Yep. I mean, here, we'll go back. I'll tell a quick story. Back in the day, I used to be the college Republicans president for my college, and I was president for 2 years. And I remember distinctly, we were trying to go to CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, right? So out in D.C., I was up in New York State. So it was a 5-ish hour drive, somewhere in that 4 hours. So it wasn't going to be a huge thing, but we were looking to leverage our student activity dollars that every student pays into to help with the student activities board. And I remember distinctly, Phil, like there were other groups on campus, the college Democrats notwithstanding, but Amnesty International. I mean, you go through all the different organizations that are all do good, right? And predominantly left-leaning. They had no problem getting their student activity dollars. They put in their request. It was instantly approved within like an hour. We put in a request just to get like the basic stuff for hotels, and we had to fight. We had to fight like tooth and nail in order to get that funding approved. And I remember at that moment, like, we're back in the 2010s at this point, and I'm thinking like, it shouldn't be this hard. This is our dollars at a institution that I'm paying money to go to. Why am I having trouble accessing this? And this was, like less than 15 years ago. Here we are today. I could almost imagine being in that exact same scenario and not even having a chance to get those dollars, because the folks who have been so entrenched, they make it so the systems are now recreated to favor one group versus another group. And I mean, right now, if you look at where the funding is coming from, yeah, a lot of it is coming from the donors, but you mentioned the taxpayer. And I just want to highlight this again, Phil, that the taxpayer who is revolting, we have all these public funded, secondary education institutions like your SUNY schools up in New York, or, your UPenn in Pennsylvania, or you go across the country, all the different state iterations. Do you see that there's going to be a direct backlash to the funding of those institutions? And if so, what will that lead to? Where do you think that the students who would traditionally go that route, where will they go? And then subsequently, the administrators, the faculty, the folks who are that 80% on the left currently sitting in those seats, where do they go? Do they just kind of float from one institution to the next? They put on, their what is it? The invisibility cloak from Harry Potter, like, I'm not a Marxist, and they hide, and then they go to some back office, right, at a private college. Like, where do these folks go to?
That's exactly it. Like, some of them are going to end up going to Starbucks and working as baristas with their PhDs. But
that gender studies degree coming in handy today. Yep. Okay.
Exactly. And we're already seeing some of that because there's a huge glut of job applicants seeking faculty positions and not enough faculty positions to hire them into. So you'd think that intuitively, like a college professor, even someone on the left would think, well, maybe we have a problem. We're not attracting students to our disciplines. No one wants to major in history or gender studies or philosophy or social sciences, all these degrees that previously, well, maybe with the exception of gender studies, but previously these were popular degrees. They're all in absolute decline. Students are fleeing them. They're voting with their feet. And instead, they're majoring in business, accounting, pre-med, biology, things that actually have a career path in them, but also tend to be the less politicized disciplines on campus. I mean, you can't really teach Marxist accounting. It doesn't work. I mean, the Soviet Union tried that. It just doesn't work. But you can teach Marxist literary theory all day, and it's the most useless field of study possible. And yet there are entire degree programs built around it. But students do not want to teach, to take those classes, and the people that are teaching them are finding themselves basically with degree programs, but no students that want to attend them. So what do? One of the moves is they've tried to mandate and regulate what students take on campus. So in order to graduate, you have to get your gen ed class in diversity training, or gen ed class and DEI, all these political or social activism. These things have grown in rapid number over the past couple of decades. Overtly politicized content that is now mandatory as a box you must check in order to get your degree, no matter what you happen to be taking your major in. So there's a real problem there, that the backlash of students voting with their feet by running away from the ideological skewed disciplines is being met with, well, we have to mandate them to take those classes anyway. But I don't think that lasts for very long, because there are only so many classes you can require for a degree. And I think the longer term pattern we're going to see is that this job glut of people with low value or even useless degrees and in fields that have no students are going to find themselves shut out of the academy. They don't really have a pathway forward to do the career that they wanted, because the subsidy money, even though it is intense and several tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars from the taxpayers are supporting basically paid activism in the academy, there are more people that want to be activists than there are jobs for them.
One of the things you just said there, Phil, and I think this speaks to exactly where we're finding a lot of this reality now, headbutting the ideology that a lot of our friends on the left had for a number of years. And you look at the idea that people aren't buying what they're selling, right? And that just speaks to where I think you have a lot of folks that go into higher education and they get sold this bill of goods, right? You can do all these wonderful, amazing things, but economics, right? It still matters. Reality still matters. And when all of a sudden these folks are leaving the institutions of higher knowledge, higher education, and they go into the real world. Traditionally, we used to think like, oh, well, they're going to get slapped in the face with the real world. But then a lot of the DEI stuff went from the colleges to these larger corporations. Exactly. But even now, right, that's getting a kick in the teeth because more folks have seen what's happening there. So it goes back to there is a demand for real skills, for real services. Now, on the flip side of that, though, is I still hear a problem, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on this, Phil. Like, there still needs to be folks who are teaching the courses that do matter, right? Or if we want to bring back some split of even ideological promotions at these higher institutions, like, you're going to have to bring some folks who are conservative, moderate, like libertarian, whatever it may be, to the table. But I see a lot of those folks they got nothing to do with these
higher ed.
colleges, these universities. They're like, hey, listen, I got my job, my business, I got my career, I'm doing great, got my family. Like, I don't want to dip my toe into these incestuous groups of leftism groupthink. Like, I want to do my thing where I can add value. How do we get those folks to see that there needs to be a void filled? Otherwise, we're just going to have more of the leftist gobbledygook fill the void that has been left from the leftist gobbledygook.
I think there's an even deeper problem here. There is active and explicit hiring discrimination against non-left voices when they apply for faculty positions in many of these disciplines. And this isn't just me speculating or relaying anecdotes. There have been several studies that have asked university faculty in some of these left-leaning humanities and social sciences, do you discriminate against non-leftist applicants for jobs in your department? And they proudly will declare yes. They'll say, we absolutely do. And then they'll follow it up with something else because we're right and they're wrong. And, so that has become actually a very pervasive feature of higher ed in the last 20 years that used to not be the case. It used to be common that even a left-leaning department would have their token conservative on faculty to represent a range of viewpoints. As those people have retired, they've been replaced by ideological leftists who enjoy participating in the monothink group culture of a single perspective in the department. And they've layered over this now. Several schools, especially in blue states, have started requiring faculty applicants to fill out diversity statements as part of their job application. And what these are used for, it's not like saying, well, I value diversity as a value, not in the abstract sense. They're saying you want a specific ideological commitment to critical theory versions of diversity that basically align with the ideology of the far left. And these statements are used as a litmus test, a screening mechanism to exclude applicants who give the wrong answer from the pool. So it's basically, they've rigged the hiring game in many disciplines to where if you're not a hardcore far leftist, you don't even have a chance. This is true not only for conservative applicants, just middle of the road moderates that are apolitical and just want to study Shakespeare. They're excluded as well by the diversity statements. So I actually think that there is a role for the government in this question of, we're committed to non-discrimination in hiring practices, in all other areas of our economy. I think it's actually a right move for certain state governments to say we ban diversity statements as a mechanism or part of the hiring process in higher education. Because otherwise, if you leave it to their own devices, they build these exclusionary and discriminatory mechanisms to maintain their ideological hegemony.
And by the way, like, I can already hear the libertarians out there being like, no, we need to go ahead and make an alternative. Like, make it so we have discrimination, when we're trying to weed out the leftists. But to your point, I just want to laser focus on this. Yep. These are specifically institutions that are already getting our tax dollars, right? And tax
dollars, yeah.
This is the part, libertarians, conservatives, like, we got to get out of our ideal and talk about the real world. Like, your money's already going to these institutions via your tax dollars. So at the very least, let's put some parameters of how that money should be leveraged. Now, that's not to say, hey, maybe our money shouldn't go to these higher education. Like, that's a different argument. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. That's important.
Entirely on board with that. So maybe we should cut back the funding for higher education, especially areas that are not serving this public need that has been expressed. But when colleges go to the legislature, they always sell themselves as, well, we're educating the children of the next generation. We're providing a benefit back to society. We're increasing knowledge, and yet they're diverting resources from this ostensible fluffy sounding, appealing electoral pitch. They divert those resources into hard left activism that doesn't match the society that they're extracting tax dollars from. That's a problem. Well,
and Phil, because this is going to be my final question before we go to our final thoughts today. But, like, is this maybe opening the door? And we're already starting to see some of this. I just listened to a podcast. Mike Rowe was being interviewed by Nick Gillespie and talking about trade schools and getting kids away from looking at college as the just logical next step and saying, let's take a step back and say, what do you really want to do? And what do you need in order to be successful there? I mean, are we going to see, and are you already seeing in the data that students are like doing a hard right turn away from college specifically? And let's look at, just calling it for what it is, like men who are like, I don't need to go to school to get some flowery degree that I'm literally never going to use. Like, maybe I want to be an electrician and I can go and become an apprentice from another electrician and work with him for a few years. And hey, maybe when he retires, he turns the business over to me. And now I'm making six figures within a few years of graduating versus my gender degree studying cohort from college who they're $150,000 in debt, making $25,000 a year at Starbucks. Like, is that the turn we're going to see and already seeing?
Well, it's already underway. That's come through some of the survey data. Even though support for higher education, the four-year traditional college has tanked, one place that's been somewhat immune to that are community colleges that have two-year programs and trades. And I actually urge students that this is a way you can cut down the bill for going to college, is do your credits, your gen ed credits, do skill credits at the local community college.
And really quick, Phil, do those colleges have the same issues as what we've been talking about today, like the left-leaning isms?
Some of them do, but it's much more subdued. And in fact, one of the areas of the university where non-left-leaning faculty seem to be a bit more abundant are lower-ranked, non-tenured teaching instructors at community colleges. There's a bit more ideological diversity going on there. It's still skewed. All of higher ed is definitely skewed to the left, but this is one area of the academy that seems to be a little bit more immune than what you're seeing in like the Ivy Leagues in Harvard and Princeton and Yale, which is just hardcore left-wing activism these days.
All right, Phil, this is the part of the show where we do our final thoughts. So what I would love for you to do, if you want to put a nice, neat bow on today's episode, is leave the audience with your either call to action or something to ponder from today. So with that, Phil, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So I'll start with a plea actually to the left-wing faculty, to all the administrators out there that have embraced and endorsed this skew of shifting the university into activism and away from knowledge. And my plea and my message to them is that they are shooting themselves in the foot. They are destroying public credibility of their institutions with large swaths of the electorate, large swaths of the voters. And when they see in the coming years, or they see some of the trends that are already underway of people turning away from colleges and cutting off that spigot of tax dollars, they only have themselves to blame because they refuse to allow the other voices to have a presence on campus. The only way you can really restore that, to get some semblance of balance, is to reopen campuses to dissenting viewpoints, make other viewpoints feel welcome. The left can still have its presence there, and I encourage them to make their arguments, but it shouldn't be only the left. It should be a more welcoming place to intellectual diversity and debate over controversial ideas.
Love it. Phil, this has been a great conversation. And for folks in the audience who they're like, this is the tip of the iceberg, you're 1,000% correct, which is also why here at the Brian Nichols Show, we have over 875 episodes. You can go back into the archives, and we've actually talked about college, universities, the seeping leftism into these institutions of higher education. So please go to briannicholsshow.com, go to our episodes page and search college, universities, higher education. Those will all show up right there. Go ahead, give some of those episodes a listen. It'll give you a lot more context and where this conversation has started to where our conversation ended today with Phil, and I'm sure where our conversation will continue into the following episodes here in the future. So with that being said, folks, if you got some value from today's episode, please go ahead and give it a share when you do tag yours truly at B Nichols Liberty. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.com. Phil, where can folks go ahead and find you if they want to continue the conversation?
Yeah, I would say look at the Independent Institute. That's independent.org.
Awesome. And all links for social media over there?
Absolutely. I've got an active presence on Twitter where I comment on a lot of these issues and put data up all the time.
There you go. So there's the facts and the figures to the emotional attack that we're seeing today. So yes, 100% folks, be aware of this stuff that we're talking about, because we talk about a lot in sales. Emotions are what make people make a decision. Facts, figures, logic, reason, that's the stuff to justify the decision making. So who are the folks that are most susceptible to emotional appeals? And that's going to be younger folks. That's going to be, the folks who they don't really have a lot of life experience. They don't have that anecdotal, data to look back in their own lives. So the emotional appeals are a lot easier to make on those kids. So let's pay attention to that too, and notice when it's being used, and also to leverage the data, the facts, the figures that folks like Phil are going ahead and bringing to the table to help us make a more educated conversation. So with all that being said, folks, thank you for supporting the show. If you want to go ahead and check out the podcast version of the show, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or for the video version, if you're a video type of person, head on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook. We're uploading the video version of the show in its entirety over on those platforms. Just do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that little notification bell, and also head down below into the comments. If you are currently in college, we want to hear your experiences, particularly, especially during COVID. I mean, we didn't even touch the COVID insanity, Phil, and I'm sure that would be a whole separate conversation. So if you are in college, or you're currently in college, or were in college during the COVID era, let us know what your experience was. Or if you're a right-leaning or moderate person on college campus, what are you seeing? What's the conversation like? Do you feel like you're an outsider on your own campus? Let us know down below in the comment section. Phil, with that, any final words for the audience as we wrap things up?
Yeah, I would say, pay attention to these trends, pay attention to what we're spending tax dollars on, and, vote with your feet, including encouraging your children to make better uses of their money when they make decisions on whether to go to college and what to major in.
Vote with your feet. Also, when you look at a state that you're living in, you're like, this ain't going too hot. I moved from Philadelphia, PA over here to Indiana. So voting with your feet is actually one of the best things you can do to make a statement, because, hey, you don't want to listen to my opinion? Well, I guess you're not going to use my tax dollars. Likewise, I guess you're not going to use my tuition dollars. So yes, there you go. Vote with your feet. Can't agree more. Phil, thank you for joining us. And folks, one final thing, please support the folks who support us, and that is our amazing sponsors like Cardio Miracle, Amp America, Evil CBD, Liquid Freedom, Energy Tea, and more. All of those amazing sponsors can be found over at our homepage, briannicholsshow.com, and please support them, because they are, in fact, the folks who support us. With that being said, it's Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Phil Magness. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.